It was 11 at night when the stillness of my home pressed heavily upon me. I sat alone on the rooftop, surrounded by the quiet hum of the city, yet my heart refused to rest. The stars above seemed dimmer than usual, as though the universe itself mirrored the weight I carried within. Something had been haunting me for weeks, an invisible burden, a whisper of doubt that refused to fade. I didn't know whether it was my mind playing tricks or a truth struggling to reveal itself. But that night, the silence felt louder than any voice. My wife, Sana, had left for her parents' house earlier that morning. It wasn't unusual. Every few weeks, she would pack her bags, kiss me on the forehead, and leave with a sweet smile, saying she needed to check on her mother's health. I always let her go. Love, after all, is built on trust, or so I had always believed. But lately, a strange pattern had begun to emerge, one that gnawed at me with quiet cruelty. Each time Sana went to her parents, my closest friend Adil would also take leave from work. It seemed innocent at first, just coincidence. But coincidences lose their meaning when they repeat themselves too perfectly. Adil wasn't just a friend. He was like a brother to me, someone who stood beside me during my hardest days, who knew every corner of my life. We worked together in the same office, shared meals, and trusted each other without question. Yet recently, something about him had changed. He had become distant, secretive. Sometimes I would catch him staring at his phone, smiling faintly, then quickly hiding the screen. I didn't think much of it until that morning. When Sana told me she was leaving, her tone was softer than usual, her eyes strangely evasive. "I'll be back in 2 days," she said tenderly. "Mother's not well." I nodded, though something in me tightened. Later, at work, I learned that Adil had suddenly called in sick. The moment the news reached me, my heart skipped a beat. A chill spread through my body. The coincidence had returned again. By evening, curiosity turned into unease, unease into fear, and fear into a restless urge for truth. I left the office early and went straight to Adil's house, my heart thudding like a drum. When I reached his gate, I froze. Hanging on the clothesline in his yard was a familiar dress, one I had seen Sana wearing that very morning. My breath caught. The world tilted. For the first time, suspicion no longer felt like imagination. It felt like reality knocking on my chest. I stood frozen outside Adil's house, unable to move or breathe. The world around me blurred into a dull haze. The faint hum of a passing car, the rustle of trees, the distant sound of the sea, all of it faded beneath the pounding of my heart. The dress on the clothesline fluttered slightly in the evening breeze, taunting me with every sway. My eyes drifted toward the doorstep where 2 pairs of shoes rested side by side, one clearly belonging to a man, the other unmistakably feminine. The sight sent a shiver through my entire body. Adil wasn't married, so whose shoes were those? My mind screamed one thing, while my heart clung desperately to denial. "Maybe I'm mistaken," I whispered to myself. "Maybe the clothes just look similar. Maybe someone else came to visit." I wanted to believe that. I wanted it so badly that for a moment, I convinced myself it was true. But the quiet voice inside me, the one that had been warning me for weeks, would not stay silent anymore. It whispered the one word I feared the most: betrayal. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that dress, those shoes, that small, quiet house that now felt like a graveyard of trust. Sana called around midnight, her voice cheerful as ever. "Did you have dinner?" "Mother is a little better today." I forced a smile through my voice. "Yes, I did." She laughed softly, the same laughter that once felt like home but now cut through me like glass. As she spoke, I could only wonder whose company she was truly in. The next morning, I tried to lose myself in work, but the world had lost its rhythm. My hands moved, but my mind stayed trapped in the echoes of suspicion. The image of Adil's yard refused to fade. That evening, I decided I would not let uncertainty devour me any longer. The next time Sana went to her parents, I would follow the truth wherever it led. Days crawled by like slow poison. Finally, the day came again. Sana, with her usual grace, packed her bag and smiled. "I'll return in 2 days." I nodded calmly, hiding the storm inside. When the door closed behind her, I knew what I had to do. By nightfall, I was standing once again outside Adil's house. My pulse thundered in my ears as I approached the window. I hesitated only for a second, then leaned forward, and what I saw through the glass tore my world apart. Through the narrow crack of the window, my heart met the sight it feared the most. There in the dimly lit room sat Sana, my wife, the woman I had trusted with every breath of my life. She was laughing softly, her eyes glowing with a warmth that once belonged to me. Across from her sat Adil, his face relaxed, his hand resting dangerously close to hers. They looked like two people completely at ease with each other, sharing secrets that were never meant for another soul to hear. The sound of their laughter stabbed through me like a blade. I felt my knees weaken. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. The air itself seemed to thicken until I thought I might suffocate. I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself, but my body trembled uncontrollably. My best friend, my wife. The two people I had loved and defended more than anyone else in the world, united in deceit. Their voices carried through the thin glass. "I knew you'd come," Sana said softly. You can't stay away from me for long." Adil chuckled, taking her hand. "How could I? You're the only piece I have left in this miserable world." Her soft laugh in response shattered whatever was left of my sanity. The sound that once soothed my soul now echoed like mockery in my ears. My vision blurred as anger and disbelief collided inside me. My heart screamed to burst into the room to end it all right there. But reason, cold and cruel, whispered, "Not yet. Not until you know everything." I stumbled backward from the window, my chest burning. My mind raced, replaying every memory I'd ever shared with Adil. Our laughter at work, his comforting words when life got hard, his promise that friendship was stronger than anything. Lies, all of it lies. I thought of Sana's gentle eyes, her soft words every time she left for her parents, and realized those eyes had learned to lie too. The street felt endless as I walked home that night. My footsteps echoed in the empty lanes, each one heavier than the last. I reached my house, but it no longer felt like home. I stood in the dark living room staring at the framed photographs on the wall, two smiling faces frozen in a happiness that no longer existed. That night, sleep was impossible. Memories played like ghosts circling around me, our wedding day, our laughter, our shared dreams. And now they all led to one horrifying truth. The woman I loved had become a stranger, and the man I called brother had become my enemy. The next few days crawled by like a slow poison seeping through my veins. I went to work, pretending to be normal, but my heart carried the echo of that night. Adil laughed with colleagues, cracked jokes as if the world hadn't shifted. His face showed no trace of guilt, no flicker of shame. I watched him closely, trying to read even a hint of remorse in his smile, but there was nothing, just that familiar charm masking a darkness I had never seen before. Each word he spoke felt like an insult to my trust. At home, Sana acted the same, gentle, calm, carrying out her daily chores as though nothing had changed. Yet, every time she smiled, my chest tightened. I wanted to confront her, to shout the truth into her eyes, but I stopped myself. My mother's voice echoed inside my mind, "Don't decide in anger." Sometimes patience reveals what rage cannot, so I waited, though each day of silence felt like an eternity. Nights were the worst. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, hearing their laughter in the dark. Every sound in the house became a reminder, the ticking of the clock, the rustle of the curtains, the faint hum of the fan. My thoughts turned into knives. I wondered if I had failed as a husband. Maybe I had been too busy, too distant. Or maybe love itself wasn't enough to keep loyalty alive. The questions had no answers, only pain. One evening, I finally broke. I walked into my mother's room. She was sitting quietly on her bed, counting her prayer beads, her face glowing with the calmness of age. "Mother," I said, my voice trembling. She looked up immediately, worry shadowing her eyes. I sat beside her and told her everything. About Sana, about Adil, about what I saw through that cursed window. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she placed a hand on my shoulder and said softly, "My son, betrayal is a wound that bleeds slow. But don't let anger blind you. Sometimes what we see isn't the whole truth. Give fate a little time, it will speak for itself." Her words left me unsettled. What if she was right? What if there was something I didn't know? I left her room that night with confusion warring against fury. Yet one thing was certain, I would find the truth no matter how much it hurt. The next time Sana went to her parents' house, I would follow again, not out of doubt, but to end this torment once and for all. The days leading to Sana's next trip felt like a storm waiting to strike. She had grown quieter, perhaps sensing the weight in my eyes. I watched her pack her bag with the same calm expression she always wore, folding her clothes neatly as if nothing in our world had changed. "Mother isn't well again," she said softly. I nodded without a word. My silence hung heavy between us, but she didn't question it. That night, I lay awake until she finally fell asleep. The faint moonlight touched her face, and for a fleeting second, I saw the woman I had once fallen in love with. The same innocence, the same tenderness. My heart wavered, but then Adil's smirking face flashed before my eyes, and all that softness turned to ash. The next morning, she left after breakfast. "I'll call you tonight," she said before stepping out. Her voice trembled slightly. Maybe guilt, maybe fear. I couldn't tell. As soon as she disappeared down the street, I knew what I had to do. I followed her, my heart pounding with every step. By evening, I stood once again outside Adil's house. The air felt heavy, charged with something unholy. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it gently and stepped inside, each creak of the floor echoing like thunder in my ears. My breath grew shallow as I reached the living room, and then, through the open doorway of the next room, I saw them. Sana sat on the edge of the bed, her face pale. Adil stood before her, his tone low but urgent. "We can't keep hiding forever," he said. "If the truth comes out, everything will end." Sana's hands trembled. "It already feels like it's ending," she whispered. "Then stay with me," he insisted, stepping closer. "We'll find a way." Her eyes filled with tears. "You don't understand." This is wrong. That was enough. The walls inside me crumbled. I burst into the room, my voice like thunder. "Wrong? You don't even know the meaning of the word." Both of them froze. The color drained from their faces. Adil's lips parted, searching for words that wouldn't come. Sana's eyes widened in terror. "I saw everything," I roared. "The lies, the deceit, the betrayal. And you," I pointed at Adil, "the friend I called brother. You poisoned my home." Silence filled the room. Only my ragged breathing echoed between us. Sana wept, but her tears did nothing to soothe the fire inside me. "Enough," I said coldly, turning away. "Hadi, from this moment on, the truth will decide what remains." The night after the confrontation was endless. I sat alone in the living room, staring at nothing, while memories of that moment replayed like a broken film reel. The trembling of Sana's hands, the guilt in her eyes, and the silence that followed my rage. I could still hear her calling my name as I walked out, but my heart had turned to stone. There were no answers strong enough to heal what I'd seen. By morning, exhaustion weighed me down, but I forced myself to face the day. The sunlight slipped through the curtains, mocking me with its warmth. At the breakfast table, Sana sat quietly across from me. Her eyes were swollen, her face pale. The silence between us was sharp, almost unbearable. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Please, let me explain." I looked up slowly, my tone harsh. "Explain what? The lies, the betrayal, the nights you spent at your parents' house while my friend disappeared from work?" Tears welled in her eyes. "You don't understand." "I understand enough," I interrupted. "There's nothing left to say." But later that afternoon, my mother came to me. She placed her trembling hand on my shoulder and said, "Son, don't let anger become your judge." Her eyes carry too much pain for a woman who's only guilty of sin. Look deeper before you destroy what's left. Her words unsettled me. Could there still be something I didn't know? That night, when the house was quiet, Sana knocked gently on my door. She stood there with trembling lips, her eyes pleading. "I'll tell you everything," she said, "but promise me you'll listen till the end." I hesitated, then nodded. She sat down across from me, her voice shaking. "Adil wasn't just my friend. He was my fear," I frowned. "Fear?" She nodded weakly. "He's been blackmailing me for months. He knows something about my past, something I was too ashamed to tell you." Her eyes filled with tears as she continued. "Before our marriage, I made a terrible mistake. I was young, foolish, and I trusted the wrong man, one of Adil's old friends. There were pictures, letters. He somehow found them after our wedding. He said if I didn't do as he said, he'd destroy everything we built." Her confession struck like lightning. My heart clenched, torn between fury and pity. So all this, every meeting, every lie, was out of fear? I whispered. She nodded, sobbing. I was weak, but I never stopped loving you. The walls I had built around my heart began to crack. For the first time, I saw not just guilt in her eyes, but terror and a desperate plea for forgiveness. Her words echoed in my mind long after she left the room. Blackmail. The word itself felt poisonous. It explained everything: the fear in her eyes, the hesitation in her voice, the guilt that wasn't born of betrayal but of helplessness. I sat still for a long time, trying to absorb the weight of what she had confessed. My anger began to shift, cooling into something sharper and more deliberate. If what she said was true, then Adil wasn't just a traitor. He was a predator who thrived on fear. By dawn, I had made my decision. I would confront him, not in blind rage this time, but with clarity and purpose. When I reached his house, the morning sun had just begun to rise. Adil opened the door, surprise flickering in his eyes before he masked it with that same arrogant smirk. "What brings you here so early, old friend?" he asked mockingly. I stepped closer, my voice steady but cold. "I know everything about Sana, about the threats, about the pictures." For a moment, his expression faltered. Then he laughed, a low, cruel sound. "Ah, so she finally told you." "Took her long enough." My fist clenched. "You used her weakness against her. You called it love, but it was nothing but cruelty." He shrugged as if it were all a game. "She made her choices." I just reminded her of the cost. Rage surged through me. But I didn't let it control me. Instead, I took a step closer until my eyes met his. "Where are the pictures?" I demanded. He grinned. "Somewhere safe." "Maybe I'll show you someday, if you ask nicely." Before I could react, he pulled out his phone, waving it carelessly. "Everything's here. One click and it's everywhere." I moved instinctively, snatching the phone from his hand and slamming it to the floor. The device shattered into pieces. His smugness vanished, replaced by a flicker of fear. "You've crossed the line, Adil," I said through gritted teeth. "You won't hurt her, or anyone, again." His eyes narrowed. "You think you can stop me?" "I can ruin you both." I stepped back, forcing myself to breathe. "Not this time. I'll let the law do what it's meant to." When I returned home, Sana was waiting. I told her everything: his confession, his threats, and the destruction of his phone. Her eyes filled with tears, but there was relief too. For the first time in months, she looked like she could breathe again. "We'll finish this," I said quietly. "But we'll do it the right way." She nodded, her voice barely audible. "I trust you." And that trust, fragile but real, became the first ray of light after a long night of darkness. That night, as the city slept, I sat at my desk staring into the dim glow of the lamp, planning every move with the precision of a man who had nothing left to lose. Adil had crossed every boundary of friendship and decency. Now, justice had to take its course. I called Jamshed, an old friend who worked in the police department. His voice was steady, though I could hear the concern behind it. "You're certain about this, right?" he asked. "Yes," I replied firmly, "but he's blackmailing my wife. I have to end this before he ruins another life." There was a pause. "Then we'll need proof. Without it, he'll slip through our fingers." I exhaled slowly. "We'll get it." The plan we made was simple but dangerous. Sana would meet Adil one last time. This time, however, everything would be recorded. His threats, his confessions, every vile word that fell from his mouth. When I told Sana, her face turned pale. She twisted the corner of her scarf nervously, fear shining in her eyes. "I don't know if I can face him again," she whispered. I took her hands gently. "You're not alone this time. We'll be right there. It ends tonight." The next evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, we arrived at Adil's neighborhood. Jamshed and his team set up their equipment: small cameras hidden, audio transmitters live. Sana stood at the doorway of Adil's house, trembling slightly. Her eyes met mine one last time before she stepped inside. I gave her a small nod, silently telling her to be brave. From the car outside, I watched through the live feed. Adil entered the room, a smug grin plastered across his face. "I knew you'd come back," he said. "You can't stay away from me." Sana's voice shook, but she held her ground. Stop this, Adil. I've done everything you asked. Let me go." He laughed darkly. "You'll never be free until you're mine. One word from me, and your world collapses." That was it. The words we needed. Jamshed's hand tightened on the radio. "We have him," he muttered. Sana flinched as Adil reached for her arm, but before his hand could touch her, the door burst open. Jamshed stormed in with his team, shouting, "Police! Step away!" Adil froze, his face draining of color. I followed him behind, my heart pounding, every muscle trembling with years of rage finally finding release. "It's over," I said quietly. "You've been caught." For a moment, the entire room was silent, except for the faint hum of the recording devices. Adil's eyes darted from me to Jamshed, his usual arrogance crumbling into panic. "This is a mistake," he shouted, backing away as two officers closed in. "You can't arrest me without proof." Jamshed's voice was steady. "We have all the proof we need. Every word you just said was recorded. Every threat. Every confession. It's all here." Adil's face went pale. He lunged toward his table, but before he could move another inch, the officers pinned his arms behind his back and snapped the cuffs around his wrists. The sound of metal locking echoed through the small room like a verdict. "You think this will stop me?" he spat, struggling to free himself. "I have connections. You'll regret this." Jamshed stepped closer, unshaken. "You'll have time to call them from your cell. For now, you're finished." I stood there, watching the man who had once been my closest friend, now dragged away like a criminal. There was no triumph in me, only an emptiness that came from betrayal too deep to celebrate. As the officers let him out, Adil turned his head toward me, his voice trembling between rage and fear. "She'll never love you again," he hissed. I didn't answer. Some wounds were too deep for words. When he was gone, the tension in the room broke. Sana collapsed to the floor, her body shaking as tears streamed down her face. I rushed to her, kneeling beside her. She buried her face in my chest, crying uncontrollably. "It's over," she sobbed. "It's finally over." I held her tightly, feeling her heartbeat against mine. Uneven, but alive. For the first time in months, I could breathe without the weight of suspicion crushing my chest. Jamshed approached quietly, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing," he said. "He won't hurt her or anyone else again." Later that night at the police station, we handed over all the evidence, the recordings, his broken phone, and the recovered photos and letters from his home. As each file was sealed and logged, I felt like we were burying the ghost of a nightmare. Sana sat beside me, silent but calmer now. When our eyes met, there was a flicker of something I hadn't seen in her for a long time. Peace. "Thank you," she whispered. I squeezed her hand gently. "No," I said softly. "Thank you for finding the courage to face the truth." Outside, the dawn was breaking. The first light of morning fell across the police station windows, washing everything in gold. For the first time, it felt like hope. The days that followed felt strangely quiet. The chaos that had consumed my life for months had finally stilled, leaving behind only silence. A heavy, unfamiliar peace. Adil's name appeared in every newspaper. The investigation unearthed more than we had imagined. Hidden in his apartment were files, photographs, and messages from several other women, each a victim of his manipulation and threats. What he had done to Sana, he had done to many. He wasn't just a traitor to friendship, he was a predator who thrived on fear. When the trial began, I attended every hearing. I sat there watching him stand in the witness box, the same man who once shared my dreams and laughter. Now his eyes darted nervously, his arrogance stripped away. The recordings, the letters, and the testimonies from other women painted a damning picture. Even his connections couldn't save him. In the end, the judge's verdict came like thunder. Adel was sentenced to several years in prison for blackmail, harassment, and emotional abuse. As the handcuffs clicked around his wrists one final time, he turned to look at me. There was no anger in his eyes anymore, only the hollow emptiness of a man who had lost everything. I didn't feel hatred, only pity. His punishment was his own doing. Outside the courthouse, Sana stood beside me. The wind lifted her scarf slightly, brushing it across her face. For the first time in a long while, her eyes were clear. "It's over," she said softly. "Yes," I replied, but what's left must be rebuilt." The path to forgiveness was not easy. The scars of betrayal still lingered in the quiet moments between us. Yet, day by day, we began to talk again. We shared meals in silence that slowly turned into conversation. We walked on the rooftop where I had once sat alone, and this time she sat beside me. Sometimes we said nothing at all, but the silence between us no longer hurt. One evening, my mother joined us. She looked at us both and smiled gently. "A relationship that survives the truth," she said, "becomes stronger than the lie that tried to break it." Her words stayed with me. Weeks later, as the sun dipped into the horizon, Sana turned to me with tears in her eyes. "If I could go back, I'd tell you everything from the start." I took her hand, holding it tightly. "If I could go back," I said, "I'd trust you from the start." The pain had changed us, but not destroyed us. Together, we had walked through fire, and though we carried the burns, we had found our way to light again. And that light, born from truth, became our peace.